Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
We are back for the GSMC Baseball Podcast here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Collin Manley, hoping you had a great weekend. I mean, I know I did. I couldn't be as bad as, maybe Astros players getting greeted by Dodgers fans. It couldn't be that bad, right? That's definitely a sight to see. They're still just a little bit bitter. I understand. It's a tough time. But we got a lot of things to talk about when it comes to baseball as we are coming down the home stretch. Yeah, things are starting to get exciting. A lot of the things we have to talk about. How about some news and noise? Getting you updated on everything that has to do with injury news around the league. And injuries, they're still piling up. And to no surprise, then they're just getting to be more and more monumental considering how few games we have left in this regular season. As long as some other news around the league, we're going to talk about the new playoff bubble that has been presented. The idea, that's something huge to talk about. We're going to talk about some of the teams that still have a chance to make the postseason and also what their important series are coming down the stretch, as well as let's take a look at some MVP odds in the National League and American League. But we're going to start things off with news and noise around the league, getting you up to date on all 30 teams in baseball. We're going to start things off with a little bit of COVID news. We haven't had as many positive tests, which has been great. But alas, the game between the San Francisco Giants and San Diego Padres was postponed minutes before the scheduled first pitch Friday night after someone in the Giants organization had tested positive for COVID-19. Saturday night's game at Petco Park was also called off, and the teams were scheduled to play through Sunday. First postponement for both of these teams, so it'll be pretty easy to make up these games. That's big news. Doubleheaders down the stretch. There have been 50 major league games now postponed this season because of coronavirus concerns. And so far, with the 7-inning games, it's run pretty smoothly trying to pick them up. Obviously, there's still some teams behind, especially like the Cardinals, but so far so good with a lot of these teams trying to make up ground. Both teams had lined up for a moment of silence for September 11, 2001 victims, and then the national anthem. But then the Padres didn't take the field, and the team announced the game had been postponed. Players from both teams lingered in and around the dugouts well after the scheduled first pitch was to be thrown. And about a half hour after the game was to have started, the Padres announced the reason for the postponement. And a few minutes after that, the Padres filled into the stands for a team meeting. We are still waiting for any type of update of when these games will be made up, but I'm sure that news will be coming pretty shortly. So some more postponements just adding on. 50 games. Can't believe it. But hey, things have kept rolling on. I thought early on with the way the season was going, as we were getting those postponements, that maybe things were just going to be done and we weren't going to get a season to happen, but we've been rolling with the punches and moving on. So fingers crossed that things keep going positively and we don't have any issues and a postseason ends up happening. The Minnesota Twins, Sergio Romo, he has been suspended for actions versus the Cleveland Indians. The reliever, Romo, was suspended one game and fined an undisclosed amount for his inappropriate actions during Friday's 3-1 win over the Cleveland Indians. Romo pitched in the 8th inning for the Twins and added some spice later in the inning with a flyout by Francisco Lindor. The two were kind of jawing at each other, had to be separated. I actually really appreciate the fact that the Twins are the ones stepping in on this and not MLB. I like it because they know that we can't have these confrontations between players. We can't have this happening because of the threats with the COVID and everything. I'm really glad to see that they stepped in to try to fix this. We'll see if anything more comes from it. I doubt it does because it really was just a lot of jawing between the two and nothing really else happened. But props and kudos to the Twins for handling this the way that they did. Moving on to some injury news. Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton for the Yankees. Well, Judge with a right calf strain, Stanton with a left hamstring strain, could return to the Yankees within a week, according to manager Aaron Boone. Judge has been sidelined since August 26th when he returned to action for one game but had to exit after re-injuring his right calf. Stanton hasn't been in the lineup since August 8th. Boone had said, I would say they're very close. They're both feeling well. They're both doing well. Hopefully we're in the final days before the start, getting some at-bats and playing with us. Judge and Boone could be headed to the Yankees, Judge and Stanton could be headed to the Yankees alternate training site as soon as this weekend, which is good news as the Yankees are starting to get things clicking a little bit again as they had a big series against the Orioles to try to fight and keep that playoff spot of theirs. Getting any boost back to their offense is only going to help the situation. Zach Wheeler for the Phillies. All right, this one's a bummer for Zach Wheeler. We'll start there. It's a bummer for him. But we do have to talk about the fact that he's human like the rest of us. Zach Wheeler lost his balance while putting on his jeans on Wednesday. And his middle fingernail on his throwing hand was caught in the lip of his belt buckle area, partially detaching the nail from his nail bed, resulting in some blood and soreness. So it's unclear whether he will be able to pitch again for the Phillies this season. Joe Girardi was quoted saying, it really depends on how it responds to treatment and the soreness and what happens to the nail. We've talked to hand people and surgeons to try to figure out what the best course is to try and save the nail and get rid of the inflammation as soon as possible. And I don't know about you, if you've ever experienced this, but when a nail comes off, fingernail, toenail, it's very sore. It's very sensitive. This hurts for an extended period of time. All you can really do for it is give it time to come back, heal back, get the nail to come back and everything. So we'll see what happens with Zach Wheeler moving forward as pitching help for the Phillies they need. I mean, their bullpen's been more of the problem than starting pitching this year, so you don't want to take any losses anywhere, though, in pitching, that's for sure. Ronald Acuna Jr. had to be helped off the field after he fouled the ball off the inside of his left ankle during a fourth inning plate appearance against the Nationals on Friday. He fell to the ground after the ball struck him, was trying to stand up, went down to the ground in pain again. X-rays came back negative, and the slugging outfielder is day to day. We're seeing more of these guys inflict damage on themselves in these foul balls in recent seasons, and it's scary stuff. We've seen some scary injuries come from this, so hopefully Ronald Acuna will be able to come back with no problems. For the Cincinnati Reds, Jesse Winker, Mike Moustakas, and Tyler Thornburg all had to exit Thursday's 8-5 Reds loss to the Cubs at Wrigley Field. Winker is dealing with some lower back tightness and was not in the starting lineup Friday. Moustakas, also not in Friday's lineup, was diagnosed with a left foot contusion after being hit by a pitch there in the fourth inning. And Thornburg was placed on the 10-day IL with a right elbow strain. Big news considering that the Reds are trying to make up as many games as they can as we're getting down to the end of the season here. They got some ground to make up to be in the playoff picture. So any injuries right now is just bad news for them. The Oakland A's, Matt Chapman, who hasn't played since last Sunday due to a right hip injury, sought a second opinion and who specialized with hip disorders. It was reported as Dr. Mark Philippon. Chapman hasn't been placed on the IL, but the club should know more soon. It had been thought he is going to opt for hip surgery and likely be out for the rest of the year, is what we are thinking and seeing as of recent. Stephen Piscotty had some left wrist soreness, expected to be back in the lineup Saturday after missing 4 games, manager Bob Melvin said. And AJ Puk had a left shoulder sprain, was showing progress as he worked toward a return to Oakland's rotation, but suffered a setback last Sunday and was shut down from throwing. Not something you want to be seeing. On Friday, Melvin announced that as their number 1 prospect, he will undergo surgery on his shoulder next week. So we'll most likely be seeing a delay for him moving forward. The Washington Nationals, Sean Doolittle had to exit his appearance in the 9th inning for the Nationals' 7-6 loss to the Braves on Thursday after throwing just 3 pitches, placed on the 10-day IL Friday with a right oblique strain. It's been a very tough year for him. He's been struggling throughout the season with a high ERA of 15 by August 13th. He's placed on the IL then with right knee fatigue. Then he came back from his injury. He was pitching all right, but then he got his ERA down to about 5.87. But another injury came his way. Just up and down season for him, even with just 60 games. It's just been frustrating for Doolittle trying to get things going. Washington, we've talked about this before with some injuries. They're kind of on the outside of the postseason. They still have a chance. They still have a chance to get in. But it's looking like they're on the outside. The regular season really is dwindling down. It's unclear on whether or not we'll see much of Sean Doolittle this year. And this might be the last time that we even see him for the Nationals, as he also is a free agent at the end of the season. For the Chicago White Sox, Carlos Rodon, he was dealing with some left shoulder soreness, and then Aaron Bummer, left bicep strain, some issues for the White Sox pitching staff. It looks like the final stretch of the year, they could be seeing some of these guys coming back. General Manager Rick Hahn was saying that they're progressing. We're starting to see some positive things. Slow building throwing program, what they're doing with some of these guys. Rodon had a 60-pitch outing on the alternate site. Scratched recently due to some back discomfort, but they still think he's going to be able to return at some point over the next couple of weeks, which is a very positive sign. Any help to pitching is only a great thing, considering the White Sox, their offense, we knew it was going to be good. We knew they had young players. They have been outperforming probably a lot of expectations. So any help to help get the pitching staff going even better is great news for the White Sox heading into the postseason. Minnesota Twins placed Luis Arraez on the 10-day IL Friday with left knee tendonitis. Second baseman had been dealing with knee issues throughout the season. Unclear if he'll be back before the end of the regular season. 113 plate appearances so far, hitting .288 for the Twins. Definitely don't want to see anybody leaving as we're getting closer to the end of the year. But 10-day IL, we'll see what happens if he can be back more towards postseason time. For the LA Angels, David Fletcher, who's been out since August 30th with a sprained left ankle, took some batting practice and ground balls, ran the bases, had a series with the Rockies at Coors Field on Friday, started up. Second baseman was hitting .313 in 35 games this season. Hopeful to be back in the lineup Saturday moving forward. Boston Red Sox. Some news that we have to talk about. Hey, I know their team is down. This is my team. They're having a struggling season. But let's talk about some pitchers, at least in positive ways. Chris Sale. This name has not been brought up at all this year because having Tommy John surgery last March, we knew he wasn't going to be playing here. But he began throwing for the first time. Red Sox manager Ron Renick said Friday, I probably talked to Chris maybe about a week ago, and he's been doing really well. He started to play catch, and the catch has gone really well. So it's been about a week now since he started to throw, and everything is going really well. The earliest Sale would be able to return the mound for Boston is June or July of 2021. That's all right. Don't rush him back. He's got to be better than last year. You knew he had some issues he was dealing with. Give him all the time to heal with that contract he just got. Take it smart with Sale. All right, the pitching is so hard to watch for Boston these days. Be smart with your best pitcher. Nathan Eovaldi will make his first start since August 21st on Saturday against the Rays after being sidelined with a right calf strain. So that's positive news to see potentially their best starting pitcher as of right now on the roster coming back. All positive news for the Boston Red Sox. For the Atlanta Braves, Tommy Milone, who the Braves had acquired from the Orioles in a trade on August 20th. Well, he was placed on the 10-day IL Thursday with left elbow inflammation. Left-hander has been given up 7 or more runs in 2 of his 3 starts for Atlanta. Was a smart move to try to go get pitching help, but he has just not looked sharp. Definitely something to be concerned about moving forward. This move just comes 2 days after the Braves had to put Max Fried on the 10-day IL with a left side muscle spasm. They're hoping still that Fried is going to be a short stint, and there's not going to be much there after the 10 days be back. And the nice thing about pitchers in these 10-day stints is realistically as a starter, 2 starts is the worst that you missed. That's the worst. So they're hoping that he can come back and be the dominant pitcher that he has been really all season. He had been dealing with some lower back tightness throughout the season. So just trying to keep it smart, and I don't blame the Braves. They got to hold on to that top spot, but I don't blame them being careful going into the postseason, knowing that there's just no depth there really at all. So might be a smart move for them. And then Cole Hamels, he was scheduled to throw a bullpen session on Thursday at the alternate site. That went well. He could be cleared to return as soon as Tuesday or Wednesday against Baltimore. So there will probably be more news there because that would be huge for Atlanta to get any pitching to come back. Chris Paddock for the San Diego Padres, he exited a start against the Giants on Thursday following the second inning with a sprained right ankle. X-rays ended up coming back negative, so he was considered day-to-day. Unclear when the injury actually really occurred, though Paddock's fastball velocity has been noticeably down in that second inning, so it was definitely a red flag for the team, and they knew to get him out of there. It's something. It's been the biggest thing we've noticed with pitchers, I feel like, this year. You can pick up really quickly when that velocity is down, something's way off, and we've been seeing it quite a bit throughout the year. For the Dodgers, Dustin May had to come out of his start against the Diamondbacks on Thursday as well after being hit on the inside of his left foot by a comebacker in the first inning. He's considered day-to-day right now going forward. The Dodgers also placed Walker Buehler on the 10-day IL Thursday for a blister on his pitching hand. It's the second time Buehler had to go on the IL due to a blister issue. Move happened on September 9th. It was also originally hoped for that Justin Turner could return for this weekend series against the Astros at Dodger Stadium, but Dave Roberts said Thursday the club is shooting for Turner's return to be early next week, who's been out since August 29th with a left hamstring strain that suffered between a stolen base. He's running at 50 to 60% right now. Said on Wednesday, I imagine at Saturday things have been ramped up a little bit more, but they're still just taking it easy with Turner with such a massive lead in the division, knowing that they're going to make the postseason. They're going to take their time with this one. Jose Ramirez for the Cleveland Indians has been dealing with a left thumb contusion the past few weeks, and the swelling recently caused him to come out of Wednesday's game when the switch hitter would have to hit left-handed against a right-handed pitcher. Cleveland is hoping he'll be back on the lineup for Friday's series against the Twins, a big one at Target Field, but they are still not 100% certain when they will get him, what they will be getting out of him. Sandy Alomar Jr. said as the temporary manager, we're just trying to find ways with the better treatment so he can heal faster. So any help for the Indians offense, that's been their concern this year, trying to make sure that things are boosted and are going to be okay. And then lastly, the Philadelphia Phillies, Jay Bruce and Scott Kingery were scheduled to take batting practice at the alternate site on Thursday. Eligible to return off the 10-day IL, Kingery is, as soon as he's ready. So that'll be a nice boost to Philadelphia's lineup. But the earliest that Jay Bruce can return was Wednesday. Maybe they will be back even sooner, or next week is what we're looking at potentially. Something to keep an eye on just to help boost the Phillies lineup in any way possible. So that's going to be it for news and noise around the league, getting you caught up on all 30 MLB teams. We are going to be diving into a little bit of a change that might be coming based around a postseason bubble, which when we talk about is this a bad idea, good idea, we're going to discuss it a little bit more here after a quick break on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
We are back here in the GSMC Baseball Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. Just got done talking about news and noise, getting you up to date on all news and noise with all 30 MLB teams. We got a lot of injury news we had to talk about. It's getting more and more important to talk about this stuff late in the year, along with some COVID news as well as some news around Sergio Romo with the Twins having a little suspension inside for the season. But the next thing that I wanted to take a time to talk about, this might not be a crazy long segment, but it's something that needs to be talked about because it's important, is a plan for the MLB has been sent on a postseason bubble. It awaits union approval, and I feel like this is a big, good step for Major League Baseball. We had heard rumblings of this, some rumors talking about teams potentially having to go to a site for the postseason. We've even talked about this in the past, how New York could be used if wanted with, the Mets and the Yankees. Milwaukee, Chicago area could be used, but it looks like we have a little bit more of an idea of what it will look like. So the postseason plan that was being sent right now, the top 4 seeds in the American League and the National League would host all games in the Wild Card Series. And this is the best of 3 series. The 4 American League series would run September 29th, September 30th, and October 1st if needed. Obviously, that third game not necessarily always going to be needed. The 4 National League series would be September 30th, October 1st, and October 2nd if needed. So this is something that I like compared to all of the other bubbles that have been going on. Now, we have to be realistic and not throw any shade at the NBA, the NHL, considering the fact that they were starting in a postseason before baseball had even started, and they were just trying to make sure that everything was going to be safe, that they could control everything and get all games in, not have any issues. And I get that. I understand that. Have no problems with anything. But what I like about this MLB postseason bubble is that they're actually giving a home field advantage. Now, I am a diehard Milwaukee Bucks fan. And what happened in the postseason was hard. And I really do sit there and wonder if things would have changed if Game 1 and 2, and Game 5 for that matter, were actually in Milwaukee, actually in the stadium, actually, feeding off a crowd. I know is one thing that's not going to be happening for these teams anyways, but having at least that home court in this a little bit, I wonder how it alters things. This actually brings a little bit of a home field advantage in. These teams, top 4, American League and National League, so the 3 division winners, along with the best record out of second place out of the 3 divisions, earn something. They get to stay at their own home in their own bed, and that's value. Okay, there is something there. Is it a long extended series? No, it's 3 games, and anything can still happen in 3 games. But you actually are giving a little bit of incentive advantage to the teams that have your best record. It was hard for the NBA. It was hard for the NHL. They probably couldn't do this stuff. I mean, the NBA was just based on the hotels they gave you, which they might have been. Some hotels might have been better than the others. But when I'm thinking about you're staying at Disney World, they're all some pretty nice resorts. So if that really matters, whatever. But this, you actually get to stay in your city, stay at your stadium, and there's some value there. I like that. First thoughts reading through this plan. So the wild card series is big. But then after the wild card series, things change. So here's how the division series is going to break down. The highest remaining National League seed would host in Arlington, Texas. Okay? So whether you win your series or not, whoever is the highest remaining seed is going to host in Arlington. The next highest National League seed is going to host in Houston. So let's say the Dodgers get the 1 seed, they move on, they'll be playing in Arlington, Texas. Whoever's the highest seed after that, you'll be in Houston. Say they get knocked off, 2 seed, whatever. Okay. Whoever's the highest remaining seed, those are the 2 places you're going to go. Arlington, Texas to get the use out of the Rangers' new stadium, and Houston be playing in Minute Maid Park. The highest American League seed would host in San Diego. The highest rated American League seed the next highest would be in Los Angeles. Something here that gets interesting is we are completely flipping the script. We're going completely neutral site here. This would be one of the first times we're going to see flat out neutral site in an MLB postseason. And even if you're a National League team, you're going to American League stadiums. American League teams are going to National League stadiums. So we're not going to have any home field incentive after the wild card series round, which at the same point I like. Again, I like that we give value to those teams that finish well in this regular season. Then after moving into the playoffs, all right, let's make this neutral. We have our best teams left. Let's truly put them in a fair playing field. I like that. I think that's a great thing as well. And then it moves on from there. We have the championship series, which would be the American League Championship Series is going to take place in San Diego. So once again, we're going to be seeing American League team playing in a National League park. The National League Championship Series is going to take place in Arlington again, Texas, which would be the Rangers' new stadium. And then lastly, the World Series, which if everything goes according to plan, would start October 20th in Arlington and end no later than October 28th. This is all pending the Players Association approval. Most of this information coming from ESPN's Jeff Passan, who is just great with all of this. Now, this postseason plan has been given, but I still think there's a great deal of questions that have not been answered still moving forward. One of those being, what happens if a team doesn't finish 60 games? We just saw another COVID outbreak. Games being suspended. Giants, Padres. If we're not able to get these games in and it comes down to matter at the end, we have a plan for where the postseason is going to happen with a bubble potentially if this gets approved. But what happens with these games if we're not getting everyone finished up? Let's say the Cardinals have another issue or a team the Cardinals is playing has an issue and we lose some games there and the postseason's coming because we're putting ourselves in a time crunch right now. September 29th, the American League playoffs is set to start in this plan. September 30th, National League playoffs set to start. There's really no wiggle room here. So that's something that needs to be discussed and placed out there. Okay. Now, with these plans starting on September 29th and a World Series also planning to start on October 20th, what also is going to happen if we have any COVID outbreaks in the postseason? This is something else that needs to be greatly discussed. We need to have some sort of plan there with protocols that it's going to happen. Now, the players must agree to all these changes. We might get some more information, but are we going to do 7-inning games if we're in a time crunch in the postseason? I don't have a problem with the 7-inning games in the regular season. I haven't, because we want to get the games in. But is there going to be more of a pushback when it comes to the postseason to get this? Are we going to do double headers, period, and they're both going to be 9-inning games? That's an interesting discussion to be had. There's just, I like the MLB's first step forward, but there's more information that we're looking to get out. If there's something that's a big win here for at least one team, the Texas Rangers, a team that is not going to make the postseason at all, hey, your stadium is going to get highlighted all the way up to a World Series. Nice for you guys, newest facility. At least that's a little positive right there. I just have my concern, like I said. So under that plan, you got to start on October 20th. You end no later than October 28th. even in there, let's say that we have a COVID outbreak between our two World Series teams, even in our bubble, I imagine it won't happen once we get to these bubbles. I imagine we'll be quite safe, especially looking at what's happened with the NHL and the NBA. But if you have to go 7 games just because it's a competitive series and you're giving yourself only 8 days, man, I'm assuming the worst and I'm hoping it doesn't happen, obviously. But it's just something that's going to be up there. And there were concerns that have been reported as well from both sides. The Dodgers players, it was reported by The Athletic, had some concerns because MLB players have spent the season outside of the bubble, in many cases around their families. The desire of families continuing to operate without restrictions of a bubble was being very voiced by the union. This was something we also saw at the beginning before we even got a season going, because a bubble was discussed at the start of the year, and a lot of these families, a lot of these players were against it because they didn't want to be spending months away from their families. I mean, I know that the NBA and NHL was able to get this, but the MLB was really voicing that they didn't want to do this. And since they've been able to get away with this restriction and the season has been ongoing, even with all the hiccups, there's been that mumbling again of, do we really need to go do this if we've been getting away with it all year? It's a valid argument on both sides, but the MLB is really looking at all the money they want to make up here, and the closer they get to the finish line, they're going to want to be more and more protective of their product. And I can't blame the MLB for this. And if there's one other thing that I find very interesting in this, it's with how difficult it was for the Players Union and the MLB to get a season going in agreement. Did you give yourself enough time to be able to negotiate this back and forth, this whole bubble idea? Because the end of September is going to be here pretty quickly. And these negotiations at the start of the year were just awful. It looked like a baseball season wasn't going to happen just because both sides were fighting each other so strongly. Are you going to finally be able to come to an agreement on this quick enough? That might be my biggest concern. Again, I'm thinking the worst. I know. But just going off recent history, and that's very recent history, that's something that I think could be problematic. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully this thing comes back Sunday, Sunday night, Monday. Everyone's feeling good about it, but it's $1 billion, upwards of $1 billion in postseason television revenue. So that money means a lot, not just to the MLB, but also the players. It's just the participation of the players is seen as the last thing the league thinks they need. That's the last hurdle they need to clear. Participation of players. And they just see that money, they see the finish line. Maybe that's got to be their pushing point with the players, saying just like, look at how much this is going to make. Can you sacrifice a little bit to this bubble to get there? I mean, even realistically, if you get out of the first round of the wild card series, Division Series 2 World Series, you're not going to be away from family that crazy long. It's going to be less than a month if they are hard set on that October 28th date. So we'll see. I'm hopeful, but a man of concerns. That's for sure. So that's what we have with all the bubble information that's come out recently. I like the idea. I didn't know we would get here, and a plan has been sent off. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. We're going to have to talk, though, about some more postseason news, because if we're going to talk about a postseason bubble, we probably should talk about some teams that are holding on for dear life to make it into the postseason. And that's what we're going to talk about here after a quick break on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, where we just got done talking about the postseason potential bubble that could be happening. We'll see. I mean, hey, if we were able to get it done for the NBA and NHL, then maybe, just maybe, it might happen. So we'll be seeing with that. And something that I had been wondering about, worrying about, is what the postseason is going to be at the end of this 60 games. I've enjoyed looking at it week to week, how much standings have changed, teams coming in, teams going out, that I ended up really wondering, teams that are fighting for those last final spots, fighting for their lives to get in, where they are at, what we're looking at. And luckily for me, we had a writer for MLB.com, Anthony Castrovins. Do that. He was thinking the same thing that I was thinking, and he made sure to put this together. He went together and he ranked 9 teams that still have a chance to make the postseason coming into Saturday. And I wanted to take a look at them, not just the rankings that he had, but also talking about some of the obstacles in their way, some of the series that they have coming that are going to weigh big when it comes to these 9 teams potentially sneaking in. I had my concerns on the big playoff change, that's for sure. I like throwing more teams in there every now and then. Baseball just felt a little like it was a little much, but the race is going to feel great. That's something I was going to stand behind. And realistically right now, we haven't seen a lot of movement on a substantial amount of teams jumping in and out of the playoffs as of recent. The American League, we know what we're looking at. Tampa Bay, Toronto, the Yankees. Those 3 are looking like they're going to make it. Chicago White Sox, Minnesota Twins, Cleveland Indians. Those 3 are looking like they're going to make it. And it looks like Oakland and Houston, so that looks like that's going to be our 8. Now there's a slight chance for some American League teams. The Tigers aren't out of it. The Mariners, the Orioles, the Angels, they're not out of it. So we're going to get to talk about them a little bit. And then in the National League, the Braves looking like it. The Phillies getting closer and closer looking like it. The Cubs, Dodgers, Padres. But then, I mean, the Cardinals are leaning towards favorites. The Giants are leaning towards it. The Brewers are getting – there's a lot that could be happening there. So there's a lot of other teams that could still try to get in. So we're going to take a look at the 9 teams that were in here that still have a chance. And we're going to start things off with the Washington Nationals, which the only reason they still really have a chance is because they're in the NL East and a lot of things could happen here. Now, at the time, they have 17 games. They're 5 games back of the NL wild card. Their strength of schedule, I mean, the winning record is .521. It's mainly, I mean, as put in this article as well, they're defending champs, so we feel like we need to mention them a little bit. But also we need to talk about Juan Soto, how amazing he's been. I really hate the fact that we're not going to see Juan Soto in another postseason. Last year's postseason going into it, as they kept going further and further and going into even the World Series, I talked a lot about how this is the young superstar getting his chance on the biggest stage. We're going to love this kid. He's going to be great. Well, this season he has been continuing that on as he's been absolutely outstanding for the Nationals. And sadly, it's looking like we're not going to get to see him in any type of postseason format. But he's young. He's still young. We're gonna get our chances with him over many, many years. I mean, wait till we get to talk about him and the contract that he eventually is going to sign. It's going to be ridiculous, and he's just been great. I mean, 30 games, batting 368, 11 home runs, 31 RBIs. I mean, he just doesn't have the games that everyone else has, and that's that's the sad part about it. I wish we could see him. And another guy that's been amazing for him, Trey Turner as well. He would be stronger in MVP discussions if he just wasn't on such a bad team. And even though bad team players can win it, we're just not going to see him. So Nationals way back. Sorry, just most likely isn't going to happen. The next team to talk about, the LA Angels. 4.5 games back of Houston for second in the AL West, 6.5 back of the wild card. So if they want to get in, it's going to be the AL West, not really the wild card. They have 14 games left, strength of schedule, 495 winning percentage. So this offense is the thing that is interesting. Okay, they're 6-4 in their last 10 games. They can't get anybody out. They can't stop people from scoring, but they put up runs. And if they just get enough pitching down the stretch, could they make a run? It's possible. It's possible. It really much is. And when you look at their remaining schedule, the problem is they don't have games against the Astros to make up straight games. They have the Rockies a couple times, the Diamondbacks, the Texas Rangers, and then they end things on just a tough stretch of 5 games, 2 against San Diego, 3 against the Dodgers, which if San Diego and the Dodgers stay hot, we might be talking about potentially the Dodgers trying to overtake San Diego or LA for the top spot. So their biggest problem is they run to a brutal 5-game stretch to end the year, and they just don't have games against teams to make up ground. Schedule working against them. We'll see what they can do. I mean, they took 4 games from Houston to make up quite a bit of ground, but they're just not going to have that easy ground to make up like they did. So that's why the Angels, it's looking like it's going to be a long, tough stretch to try to get back into it. But they made a fun run here at the end, and if they do make it, props to them. But it's looking like it ain't going to happen for the Angels as well. Now the Baltimore Orioles, they're 4 games back of Toronto for the second in the AL East, 3.5 back on the wild card. So the wild card is still in play. 16 games left. Strength of schedule, winning percentage, 513 of their opponents. Now, the fact that we're even talking about them in this season is incredible in itself. They lost 108 games last year. Now we're talking about a postseason. Like, what? Like, this is just phenomenal. Phenomenal to talk about this. But they are coming off a tough stretch with the Yankees. That just happened. They had some ground here. They were really open to make it. They've lost 3 straight to the Yankees at this point. And that's what's going to make this thing tough. I mean, 1 more game with the Yankees, then they have an Atlanta team that needs to win. 5 games Tampa Bay they need to win, and then they get Boston, which helps, but it might be too late at that point. But we do need to hold on to this. They do end the season with 3 games against the Blue Jays, which if they can make any serious run here to make some noise for a wild card spot and say that the Blue Jays are falling off in any way, that 3-game series at the end of the year could end up to be massive. Very, very massive. So that's the one thing they really do have on their side. Their last series, if they can stick around, hang around, is set up for them to kind of control their own destiny and try to make it in. It's not an easy stretch, but it's an opportunity for sure for the Orioles. For the Seattle Mariners, this is another team. The AL West looked just dead. It really did. And then we just had some teams make some runs. It's been incredible. I mean, 6-4 in their last 10 for the Mariners. They're 2.5 games back for Houston for second in the AL West. 4.5 games back the AL wild card. So there's their dream, their optimistic play is also to catch the Astros. That's what they have. 16 games left, strength of schedule, 528 winning percentage. Now, for the Mariners to get there, their schedule, they're looking at games with Arizona right now, series they're in, 2 against Oakland, San Fran, San Diego, and then the big series for them, because if they can linger around, they get a 3-game series with Houston. They're 2.5 back now. If they can stay within that 2-game range, getting 3 games with Houston gets to be huge. And then finally, a 4-game series with Oakland. And I should never even say it. Should never even consider throwing games. But if it's looking like Seattle might sneak in, and Oakland can try to wrap up potentially the top seed, and they can finagle their way to get maybe Seattle. Maybe they'd rather see Seattle in the postseason than Houston. Maybe they can help that cause. Who knows? In a 60 games, hey, everything's been weird. Everything's been crazy. I'm not counting out anything at this point. But again, this is Seattle. They have a chance. They have Houston on their schedule to help themselves out. San Diego's going to be tough. Oakland's going to be tough. They unfortunately don't see any wild card teams that they're really going to be battling in front of them. So it's controlling their own destiny. How can you do here down the stretch? You got Oakland fighting for a top seed. You got San Francisco fighting for their life to get in. San Diego fighting for a top seed. Houston, who's fighting you off. It's a brutal gauntlet of a schedule they have. And what they've done to be even in the conversation after being so far gone is incredible. But there is a possibility. Can you get to that Houston series? And can you put yourself in the picture? If you get to that point, we'll be talking about you again, Seattle. So they probably, out of all these teams, have the toughest schedule we've seen so far out of the 4 teams we've talked about. But the window of opportunity is there. So we'll see. The Detroit Tigers, they're 3.5 games back of the AL wildcard. We're not even going to talk about making it for the AL Central. Sorry, that one's not going to get caught. There's 3 teams really good ahead of them. They're not catching them. 14 games left, strength of schedule, .493 winning percentage. So another team here in the Tigers that I don't think anybody, the Orioles and Tigers, if we were to have told you at the beginning of the season, towards the final stretch, we were talking about the Orioles, the Tigers, the Mariners, about fighting for a playoff spot, you would have probably thought we were crazy. You would have thought we were crazy. But yet the Tigers are alive in this still. Looking at the wild card, 3.5 games back. So here's what they have. Chicago, not considered in this wild card at all. They have 2 games there. A 2-game stretch with Kansas City, then 4 games Cleveland, 2 games Minnesota, 4 more games against Kansas City. They don't see, obviously, any teams that are in that American League wild card. That's because you're playing the American League Central. You are playing a tough stretch, even though you have all those Kansas City games in there. The Kansas City games are going to help. They're going to help. The problem is those 2 games with the White Sox, those 2 games with the Twins, those 4 games with the Indians are all must-win for those teams because they're fighting to get a top 4 seed. They need to get first place or have a high second-place record. That's what makes those games problematic. If the Tigers can hold things off and prey on those Royals games, that's great. And ending the season with the 4 games against the Royals is, the best case scenario for them. Because if there's still a possibility they can make it, having those 4 games at the end is the best thing. It's so hard to see anything happen considering what's in the middle, what's in between. Best of luck to the Tigers. I mean, I'd love to see their young pitching in a postseason 3-game series. I'd love to see it. I'm a little pessimistic of this one happening again. Sadly, have to say it. Number 4, the Rockies. Man, how they have fallen. How they have fallen. They were the team that it looked like they were going to make it for a long, long time. And now that the Giants are ahead of them, just playing better baseball, Rockies. It's been a tough stretch of a season for them. It really has been. So up and down. Things were looking so great, and then they are here where they are. The nice thing about the Rockies, though, 2 games with the Angels right now, then 2 games with Oakland. Okay. 4 games with the Dodgers. That's big in itself. Then the team that's ahead of them in the San Francisco Giants, you get a 4-game series there. You are 1.5 games back of the NL wildcard right now with 16 games remaining. That strength of schedule is tough. I mean, I told you, the Oakland, Dodgers, Giants. But those 4 games with the Giants can either ruin their season, end it right there, or put them in the playoff picture a little more solid. Because if they come out of that series strong with the Giants, against the Giants, they get to end with 4 games against the Diamondbacks. If they come out of there with a lead in any playoff picture, they get a nice end of the season to try to lock themselves in. That's where they sit. This is a control your destiny fully schedule for them. Stay alive versus these tough teams. Take it from the Giants. Lock it in against the Diamondbacks. Out of all the teams we've looked at, this is the best path for sure. Even with it being a tough winning record, I mean, that 526 winning percentage of opponents, we'll see. It's been tough for them. They're not probably favorites at this point, but when you look at it all, they have the easiest window of these teams that are kind of sitting on the outside at the moment. So that's what it's looking like for the Rockies. Next up, you have the Brewers. They're 1 game back of St. Louis for second place in the NL Central. 1.5 game back as well for the NL wildcard. 18 games left. Remaining strength of schedule, 501. Winning percentage. The Brewers, what they do is they get hot in September, right? That's their thing. We always see this happening every single season. Well, maybe it could happen again, but right now the Brewers are in their thick of it. This stretch they are in right now is what's going to make or break their season. They just took a game from the Cubs. They have 2 more in that series. Then they have 5 games against St. Louis, a very nice stretch of 6 games. Kansas City, Cincinnati. That's where you can boost your record, and then you have a tough stretch of 5 games with St. Louis, possibly fighting for that second place in the division. If everything breaks right, maybe even the division is still in play. I doubt it. But can they get through this Cubs series all right? Get through that Cardinals series all right? Then you make a statement with wins against some lower teams. They can set themselves up so that they are not so stressed in those final 5 games. But realistically, they have a tough stretch where 2 teams in St. Louis and Milwaukee are going to be fighting for their lives in the playoffs. Right now, this is the thick of it. The Brewers, they're on a 2-game win streak. They put up 19 runs on Wednesday, then 1 run on Friday. So a little bit of a change there, but we'll see what they can do. If they come out hot in these next 2 series, it's the Cubs and St. Louis. We're going to be talking about the Brewers a little bit more, especially knowing that if that offense comes alive, that bullpen, it's scary. The team right above them that we are going to talk about, the Cincinnati Reds. Cincinnati, they currently 2.5 games back behind the Brewers in the NL Central, 3 games back in the NL wildcard. Strength of schedule, 503. Winning percentage. Okay, so their strength of schedule, very comparable to the Brewers, but they're further back. What they have for their schedule, well, St. Louis right now, then the Pirates. That's where they're probably looking to make up ground. I imagine with a lot of these people that are looking at these predictions going forward, they're thinking the Brewers and Cardinals are going to battle, and this is where the Reds can make up some ground is against the Pirates. But then they have to welcome in the White Sox, the Brewers, which that season could end up being huge, and then end the season on a 3-game stretch with the Twins. So even though the Brewers have the Cardinals at the end, it isn't going to look any easier for the Reds as they got to welcome in the Twins. Actually, not welcome in. They got to go to the Twins. They got to go to Minnesota for that final 3 games. So they're also, it's a tough stretch. This 60 games with just playing the American League Central, NL Central, and all of them, just playing your opponents in the American League in the same division area. It's built some beautiful schedules to end the year that are just going to be highly competitive. And the last team to talk about that's on the outside looking in, probably by a lot of people considered favorites to potentially make the postseason, just probably percentage-wise. The Mets are sitting at that 40% chance as well. The Brewers are at 52%, but the Mets are sitting at that 40%. Being in the NL East helps. helps because they aren't that far back. 2.5 games back for second place, 2 games back at the NL wild card. The Phillies have 18 games in the last 16 days of the season, and we don't know if they're going to have Zach Wheeler. That's the knock against the Phillies above the Mets. The Mets' schedule, well, even though they're sitting at 4th in the NL East, they still got to play Toronto, get some games against Philadelphia, get some games against Atlanta, Tampa Bay, and they nicely end the season versus the Nationals. 4-game series versus the Nationals. That helps out. So that's what we're looking at for the Mets. They have a chance that if they can get through a tough stretch as well, they can pad their stats at the end. So this is going to get fun. This is going to get exciting. This is going to be one of the most watched end of the seasons because of how many teams are still in it, how many of these teams are going to be playing important games, important series against other teams that are in it. It's just bravo to what the MLB has set up. I don't know if they planned for this or thought it was going to be this tight and exciting going into the end, but these series mean something for a lot of teams, and even for the teams that are out of it, there's more opportunities to play spoilers. And that's some fun right there. So that's going to be it, looking at some teams on the outside looking in. We're going to take one last break, and then we got to talk about some of our MVP favorites on the year. What are the betting odds on these guys? Where are we sitting? What are some of those names here coming up on the GSMC Baseball Podcast?
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Well, we got to talk about these MVPs. Conversation. It's getting to the end. The conversation needs to be had. We just got done talking about teams on the outside looking in when it comes to the postseason. But, you know, we got to talk about some of these guys that are helping us get there. What's happening with all of these teams? So we have some MLB MVP odds for the American League, for the National League. We're going deep in some names, some of the betting odds. These odds from the article that I was diving into, odds taken on September 9th. And some of this is just predictable. We knew this was coming. We know the guys that are going to be favorites. But there's still a lot of time that can be made. A hot week or two in this short season could really change a race, especially when it comes to the MVP. With all these guys listed, we have people fighting for playoff berths, playoff lives. We could see some narratives change. We could see people change their votes. And I think it is going to be fun to watch and talk about, especially with those teams that are sitting on the verge that need some hot stretches to get into the playoffs or lock in their playoff spots. So we're going to start with the National League because as of right now, this is probably the easiest MVP discussion right now. We kind of know who the guy is for the National League. I hate to say it, even with me wanting it to be a more contested race. But we'll be honest and just say it. The favorite, Fernando Tatis for the Padres, is easily the favorite when it comes to MVP voting, which it makes sense. It makes sense. He has been a rock star. He has been the face of baseball, the life of baseball all year for the Padres. One of the best offenses in baseball, and he has been just superb. So you can't even be mad about this whole situation. 15 home runs, so he's in that conversation for a home run crowd. Batting .303 on the season, that's still pretty solid. 40 RBIs, 1.031 OPS. He has been superb on one of the best teams. Has to bring up that discussion. The odds for him was plus 124 in the National League. Pretty good. And it's a big gap between other people. The guy in second, Mookie Betts. Now, here's the thing for Mookie. I'm sorry to say it. You could go on a tear to end this season. But unless if your numbers take a massive facelift up, you're probably not going to gain much ground in this MVP discussion. Tatis has to fall off. You have to go crazy to get this. Your team is so good. Your team is so loaded. Your numbers have to be nuts. He may not get the love that he needs. The name that I think is the most interesting one to watch is Mike Yastrzemski for the Giants. He's sitting in third when it comes to odds at plus 762, which a Giants team that we thought was potentially on the outside of the postseason happening is all of a sudden deep into this conversation. 2.1 WAR, 290 batting average, 9 home runs, 31 RBIs. OPS 956. His numbers aren't blowing anybody away. He's got people above him in a lot of things. But if he's the one to have the hot stretch and it pushes the Giants into the postseason, people are loving Yastrzemski. Go on social media sites that cover baseball. People are loving Yastrzemski this year just because we didn't expect this. And he's putting plays together. He's having fun. He's doing great things. We then have another big gap in betting as plus 1,100 comes in Juan Soto. We talked about Soto. His lack of games is what kills him, but even in his lack of games, his production is up there with so many other players. I mean, he would be in this home run race. He's 16 games behind Tatis, only 4 home runs. Only 4 home runs. He's 11 games behind Trout, behind by 5 home runs. Ooh, we might be seeing him in this conversation. That's just the way it's going, how well he's been hitting the ball. I mean, 1.257 OPS. He's slugging 764. My gosh. On base percentage, 492, almost getting on base half the time. Soto has been great. And if this was a 162 game season, I'd be sitting at this point 60 games in going, there's no way he's not going to get this MVP. He's going to have more games. His numbers are going to get inflated. We'd be talking about him. Behind him, plus 1,500, Bryce Harper. I was pushing the Bryce Harper noise earlier. He's fallen off a little bit, but he's still been great. He's still been very good when it comes to the Phillies. It's just he's not as high with his batting average falling down somewhat with the time with the Phillies, but even with them being a strong team, he's going to get consideration. He's going to get votes. And I'll say it again, his contract doesn't look as bad now when he's given this production. Charlie Blackmon, a guy that had such a strong start to the season. It looked like he was going to do some legendary type stuff. He's still batting .331. He's still batting pretty well. His OPS 889 is the thing that's scary because his on-base percentage, batting .331, his on-base percentage is .383. That's not amazingly great to see, but still batting .331, 6 home runs, 35 RBIs. He's still been good. It's just he's kind of an afterthought at this point, at least in my mind. Manny Machado, another guy who his batting numbers look great. His contract doesn't look as bad as it did when he signed. If we didn't have Tatis on the same team, his odds would probably be way higher. Way higher. But the fact that he's the second guy in San Diego is what hurts him. What hurts him the most. But, I mean, you can't say he's having a bad season. He's 307, while Tatis is 303. Behind him in home runs by 2. Behind him in RBIs by 2. He's just a little bit behind. That's all it is. Both great players. That's why the San Diego offense is so scary. Then you look at Trevor Story at plus 1,800. Ian Happ, plus 2,000. Paul Goldschmidt at plus 2,000. Goldschmidt's an interesting name to watch just because once he gets more games in as well, what's his numbers going to end up looking like. He might sneak up these MVP odds, and we might be talking about him a little bit more towards the end of the season. So that's kind of the National League. The National League seems pretty simple. Tatis is the guy. There's a collection of other guys. Unless the things just go absolutely crazy, it's looking like it's Tatis's award to win. And a lot of people are really kind of loving him already. The American League is where things get interesting. Very interesting. The odds at plus 400 winner is Shane Bieber, who is on a record pace for strikeouts this year. Was the quickest to ever get to 100 strikeouts. It's a shame it's a shortened season. I want to see this thing over 162. But it is what it is, living with it. He has been so dominant on a team that doesn't have offense. And when you are a pitcher with the record you have, with the numbers you have, and you are not getting the offense to back you up, it makes you get a little more love on top of it. So Shane Bieber considered the favorite right now. Mike Trout, this guy it's getting towards the end of the season. He's just like, oh, I got to make sure that I'm planted firmly in this MVP conversation. And he's a big part of why the Angels are kind of making a run, trying to get in the postseason here. Batting .303. He's gotten that average up to .303. 16 home runs, 39 RBIs, 400 on base percentage, .655 slugging. What more can we say about Mike Trout that we haven't already said? The guy's really good. He might be the best baseball player we've ever seen. Man, just Trout in this discussion every single year, and it will never feel right if he is. Plus 400 was for Bieber, plus 550 for Mike Trout. Sitting right firmly behind him, plus 650, Jose Abreu for the White Sox. Another dude that we've been giving some love to. Batting .304, 13 home runs, 40 RBIs. He is right around what Mike Trout is doing. That's why in his odds, he's not that far back. The main knock on him is OPS is lower, on-base percentage is lower, slugging obviously lower. All those just a little notch below. Okay? Not too bad, though. I mean, he's right there with Trout. If we have a couple bad starts from Bieber to end the year, Trout and Abreu have that chance to slide up. They have that chance to slide up. That's the scary thing about a pitcher. When you only get one in every 5 games, a bad start lingers compared to these other guys when they have a bad game. You have to be pretty special to win an MVP as a pitcher. And he's been that. He's been special. But 2 bad starts is not what you need. And he just got his first loss versus the Twins. But he wasn't awful in that. It's just his first loss. If they string a couple more together, could hurt his MVP chances. 4th, plus 825. My guy that I wanted to see in here, getting some love. Nelson Cruz. Again, this is that thing with the DH. His numbers are great. .333 batting average, 15 home runs, 31 RBIs, 422 on base percentage, 667 slugging. They look great. It's the life of the DH, man. You're not playing defense. You're not considered the guy out on the field as much as all these other everyday players, even though you're an everyday player as a DH. When it's just offensive production you're giving a little notch down. You, just like the pitchers, you have to be outstanding to win this thing. It's never happened before. You had to be out of this world. And while you've been crazy good, it hasn't been enough because we got some offensive players that are doing some great stuff. Behind that, you got Brandon Lowe for the Rays. He's been solid, steady all year at plus 950. Anthony Rendon, 2 Angels players in the top 6, and they're not going to make the playoffs, at plus 1125. The offense is there, Angels. Get your pitching together. Then Luke Voigt for the Yankees at plus 1250. Jose Ramirez for the Indians. He's been picking things up for them at plus 1500. Also at plus 1500, Willie Adames for the Rays. And then Tim Anderson. He's been great. Batting average has been awesome. His return to the lineup for the White Sox has only boosted them. Batting .343 on the season. He's been great. That shortstop return has helped get that team going. The American League, this one can shift around a lot. Bieber has to be on a great pace to hold his spot. Trout has been coming. Abreu's down their neck. I want to see the DH happen. I do. I just don't think it's going to be the year. And there's just a lot of names. And even these bottom names like Voit, Ramirez, Adams, Anderson, we could see that one shift around. We could have 4 new names come in there. We really could. There's a lot of movement that could happen when it comes to the American League when we talk about the MVP. But as of right now, that's what we're kind of looking at. It's going to be a fun award season. It really is. It really is. And the conversation that is going to end up being had here, once again, even in a shortened season, is can we really talk about Trout when your team doesn't make the playoffs in this short season? And you can't put MVP all on one guy. I weigh this both ways. I understand that one guy can be so valuable to a team, even if that team is not winning. And I understand the other side of it where, hey, we want to give this award to someone that is on a team that is doing really well. But sometimes, the strength of the team really does win out compared to the strength of one singular player. I can see both sides in these arguments. You just got to really look at the numbers and just go with your gut on some of those things. But it's going to be a bigger conversation in a smaller game sample. Because if you're not helping your team get to a postseason as well, when it's a shortened season, there might be more questions there of if you should be getting the votes or not. So something to definitely keep your eyes on. The MVP season is going to be fun. It's going to be fun. Same with Cy Young. Same with all these things. I mean, Rookie of the Year is loaded, absolutely loaded. As this season's been dwindling on further and further, it's going to be a harder conversation to pick between Kyle Lewis and Luis Robert. I mean, what a heated Rookie of the Year race in the American League. But that's another conversation for another day. And that's going to be it for this episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. I want to thank you so much for listening. It means a great deal. If you have the chance, please leave a positive review. What did you love from the show? Maybe you have some other MVP discussions. How do you feel about these guys that win these MVPs and their teams don't make the postseason? Does it bother you a little bit? Do you think it's fair? It's a fun discussion to have. Hope you guys have a great day, night, whenever you're listening. And once again, thank you for tuning in here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.